What's up, y'all? It's Agility. In this video is going to go over our mortal dragon boy, Siegfried. We'll talk about how to do his chain skips to better utilize his combos, the best sigils you should be rocking for him, and overall gameplay strategy. Siegfried is one of the few characters that can constantly deal damage by staying involved in the fight at all times. This is due to his ability to tank through most hits, and he's also one of the very few that has a normal attack that works as an incredible gap closer. His second normal attack lunges him across the map to stick to any boss's movements. He may not seem like he deals the most damage when compared to other characters on the training dummy, but when there's scary attacks to dodge and proper positioning required, he reigns supreme. I'm going to show you why and how this character might be one of the best in the game. First, let's talk about his combo skip, since this is going to be a major reason why this character is so good. His default combo, which then leads into perfect execution, is fairly lengthy. And since Siegfried's personal sigil allows him to gain cooldown reduction on his skills when he does a combo finisher, and gains even more when landing the perfect execution, it's important we learn to master this. This tech is also a way to get reliable amounts of damage out before the boss decides to move out of the way. You don't want to always find yourself hitting the boss with half your combo and it moves away, or unreliably swinging early, waiting for the opportunity to land the last couple of hits. Instead, we're going to give ourselves more control of how we want the fight to go so that we can develop way more consistency. There's many reasons why you'll want to master this, but one I feel worth mentioning first, and discussing later, is the value you'll get with perfect dodges. I'm mentioning it first because it adds more emphasis on why combo skipping is valuable and how it will affect your gameplay, but I'm choosing to explain it later since it makes more sense when I go over sigils. So, onto the combo skip, or as I like to call it, chain skipping. So let's start our first skip. Instead of our first attack, we can actually start the attack, but dodge cancel and begin the chain as soon as Siegfried lands from the dodge. Once you begin the chain, you simply dodge immediately after each chain. It can be done from the very first one all the way to execute if you want it. I like to throw in the second chain attack from time to time, since it's super fast anyway, as well as the combo finisher since that does plenty of damage. As long as the entire chain and execute are registered, even if you skip all of it, including the execute, you still receive your cooldown reduction regardless. You don't even need the hit to land for the cooldown to take effect, so when the boss isn't able to be hit due to their phase change or something, you can still take advantage of this by reducing your cooldowns in the meantime. This method would obviously require the improved dodge sigil, which I highly recommend using. You can still skip some parts of the combo without it, but you'll be hindering yourself too much by not taking advantage of it. If for some reason you decide not to use improved dodge, the quickest skip for you, without exceeding 2 dodges, would be the first attack of your choosing into a chain skip, allowing the second chain to go through, skip the third, then the combo finisher into execute.
Push through! Reach your doom! Feel yourself, you're finished!
In case you're still not convinced, here's some really important examples of why improved dodge is so important. The main reason is because sometimes you'll have the combo finisher or perfect execute ready to fire off, but the target is too far out of reach. This is sometimes the case and can sometimes be due to a break occurring to the boss. They'll reel back or tumble away from you. All you will need to do is chain your dodges till you're in range and it will allow you to land it. With enough experience, you'll recognize some scenarios like that are predictable, so you can plan ahead and save up some dodges or stall the combo finisher with one lunge. The combo will fail if you perform more than one lunge in a row. This leads me to my next point, how you can integrate lunge into your combo. This is very easy to do, but hard to master. There's scenarios during fights where you want your combo chain to continue going, but you need to move from one spot to the next. The dodge spam I mentioned earlier for the finisher is mostly useful for that alone. You don't want to exhaust all your dodges for everything. So what can you do to maintain your chain but continue moving around? It's simple, and I'm sure many Siegfried players already utilize this, but lunge won't end your combo, so long as you only use one per chain sequence. So once you start your chain, you're allowed one before the next chain gives you another.
This is how you're finished. Push through. Feel yourself.
Easy enough. The tough part is mixing in dodges to extend the distance and the combo even further. Because you only have so much time before you would need to swing again, and then be forced to use your lunge to close the gap.
This is how. Push through. Prove your strength. You're finished.
If it sounds too complicated, don't worry. It isn't totally necessary. The most important thing you want to take out of this is recognizing that you cannot use more than one lunge before the next chain, and that you should be doing your best to extend your combo and land your massive attacks while moving about. This next thing is something I'm sure a lot of Siegfried mains know as well, performing a double perfect execute.
Be calm. Feel yourself. You're finished. Time I played.
All there is to it is making sure that you have a link attack available during the perfect execute. By timing the link attack just as soon as the first hit on the downward strike lands, you're able to do it again. This may seem unreliable or inconsistent since you don't really have a lot of control over the boss's stun gauge being completely filled and at what part of the combo you're in. Except with chain skipping, we actually do gain some control over that. If you're paying enough attention to the stun gauge and it looks like it's just about to be filled, what you can do is actually skip straight to your perfect execution. That will give you enough time and damage to be able to land the link attack. Now let's move on to the Immortal Dance. This is what really sold me on Siegfried. This is the coolest, funnest, and most satisfying part about Siegfried that really made me fall in love with this character. What makes Siegfried stand out is that he's able to stand super close and basically live there. Every character can dodge, and some characters can take a hit, but what we want to be able to do is exist in the boss's face while dishing out hundreds of thousands of damage. In order to do that, we need to be able to dodge incoming attacks while also keeping our chain going. So once you become very familiar with the timing of the chain after a dodge, you can start to put yourself in the death zones of bosses. Die, die, and die again until you get the hang of it. But eventually, you'll be untouchable while performing your perfect timings. The trick is to watch the boss's attacks as they're coming. When you know you have to dodge, you can allow your last input attack to fully go through while focusing on aiming for that perfect dodge. Even though Siegfried requires you to perfectly time each attack, if your last swing was thrown out for longer than the window of time allowed for the next chain, like this, by dodging, you can continue the chain, so long as you time it based on the dodge's required timing. And since you're able to dodge multiple attacks without losing the combo, you're able to keep dodging, even multi-hit attacks, until you land a perfect dodge. If you do manage to land a perfect dodge, with that invincibility, you're able to continue your combo without taking any damage. During that dance, you should still be trying to continue your chain as best and as comfortably as you can. With a bit of practice, your fingers will know to hit attack shortly after the dodge, so you'll be growing closer and closer to the combo finisher as it goes on. But if you're near the end and the combo finisher is around the corner, then you absolutely want that invincibility so that you can go through with the full attack and not risk taking any damage. But that being said, even if you missed the perfect dodge, Siegfried is uninterruptible during his perfect chain, so with minimal required sigils, he stands a great chance in the face of danger to continue his onslaught without really taking much damage. Topping that off with his other personal sigil, you'll be granted 20% additional defense for a short while after landing a perfect execution. So if you're chaining one into another, that's even more reason to follow through. The sigil also grants Siegfried Stoutheart, so you'll be able to use his skills if they're off cooldown, uninterrupted to further push out damage. And since you can cancel most of your skills with a dodge to try them again, you can avoid the super hard hitting attacks. But besides those, Siegfried should be able to tank most hits coming his way. So, if you want to master this, learn the timings of when to chain after a dodge so that you can pay more attention to the attacks coming your way. A great way to practice this is to allow some attacks of the chain to go through most of their animation to maximize your time before you would need to dodge. You'll either dodge before your attack comes out, during the swing, or near the end of it. Your main focus should be timing your dodges. With practice, your muscle memory will also involve the chain skip in the sequence. It will turn into a beautiful dance between you and death. Let's go over the skills you want. First is Uwe. This is Sieg's best skill due to its short cooldown and powerful damage. It's his second hardest hitting skill, hitting for over 700,000 damage, providing gap closing and also allowing Sieg to go into his combo afterwards. It does also give Sieg Stoutheart, but I'll explain later why this doesn't really mean anything. The next skill, Nella Nav, is the strongest damaging skill, hitting for 1.1 million damage. The skill can hit twice and only really needs proper spacing on smaller enemies for the double hit, but since most bosses are massive, you won't need to worry about that. The skill takes a second to fire off, and the lag time afterwards is massive if you don't dodge cancel it, which I would highly recommend doing. But overall, a great skill, and the amount of stun it deals is crazy high. Moving on to Verdrangen. This skill only deals 450,000 damage and also has a lag time after, so a dodge is needed to avoid that. It's got great range and comes out pretty quickly, but unfortunately that's it. Even though it applies a defense down, we know damage cap is a thing. The main exception is if you fine tune your build to be 20% below your damage cap and allow this skill to get you there. This is pretty hard to do, but not impossible, and may involve a decent amount of luck to get the right combination. The length of time the debuff is applied is long enough that you can easily have it off cooldown by the time you need to reapply it. And finally, the last skill you'll want will be Mirage. This can, and sometimes should be swapped in and out with the other buff, Salvatore, if the boss you're going up against has a ton of annoying debuffs that you're not comfortable dealing with naturally, or if you want to make those debuffs easier for your team to handle. Otherwise, Mirage serves as an incredible buff for you and your team. 70% extra defense isn't very easy to come by, and with the playstyle that you should be adopting as Siegfried, that 70% can be the difference between landing a combo or dying. So, super quickly, I will go over why you don't want to use any of the other skills in case you're wondering about some of them. Draconic Release should be pretty obvious by now why you wouldn't want it, since hitting damage cap is not difficult. Mannequins would be a better version of Verdrangen if it actually did damage instead of a straight up buff. And the counter is the one I imagine some people may still try to justify as useful, but with this playstyle and build, you'll realize that the counter skill only really counters your fluidity. It's bad because you want as little interruption from the flow of your combos and damage as possible, but while still taking advantage of perfect dodges constantly, since that grants you your invincibility, which is super beneficial if you're running the Nimble Onslaught sigil. If there's an attack you could parry, that just means you could have perfect dodged instead, so I would avoid using this entirely.
Seems like we have no choice. Staying the course. Again. You're finished. Push through. Follow my blade. Meet your doom. Feel yourself.
Now on to sigils. I understand some people won't have the best of the best sigils to completely mimic any build they see online. And to be fair, even I don't have the perfect setup either. As aware of that as I am, I can only really recommend alternatives as we go through it if you're missing something. Otherwise, here's what you should be looking for. The first and most obvious is damage cap, and getting it as close to trait level 65 as possible. It's not the end of the world if you're 2 or 3 levels below level 65, so don't fret if that's the case. The next is a single critical rate sigil. Crit rate for every character's masteries adds up to the same amount. If you add the crit rate you get from your overmastery on top of that, and the crit rate from a right stone, you'll see that a single crit rate sigil is all you would need to get you to 100% or as close as possible to it. Next is Siegfried's personal sigil, Dragon Slayer's Ingenuity. This is the one that allows you to get cooldown reduction for performing combo finishers and even more for the perfect execution. This is super important to have and can easily be purchased from the Knickknack Shack. The next important and less obvious would be Steel Nerves. This sigil gives the player 15% damage reduction whenever Stout Heart is active. It's not going to do much for the skill Ue since that only lasts for a second, and as cool as it sounds to try and take advantage of it during some big attack from a boss so you can tank it, it's still not ideal since you mainly just want to push your skills out as often and as quickly as you can. Now, in order to take advantage of Stout Heart, you have two options. One is the easiest and less optimal choice: purchasing Stout Heart from the Knickknack Shack and letting it take up a whole sigil slot. This gives you the 15% damage reduction, and even though our normal attacks are already uninterruptible during a perfect combo, this serves to give us the ability to use our skills uninterrupted as well. The other way is to actually use Siegfried's other personal sigil, Dominance. It doesn't actually say Stout Heart, even though the effect reads out exactly as the Stout buff would, and you also don't get to see any of the Stout buff symbol when this is activated. But I've tested this and found out that Dominance does in fact allow Steel Nerves to recognize that you're buffed by the Stout buff. So you'll still receive your 15% damage reduction, and on top of that 15%, you're also receiving 20% defense when activated due to the other effect of the Dominance sigil. And to emphasize the efficiency even further, is the fact that you could get a plus version of the Dominance sigil that may have a secondary that you really want, such as Damage Cap. It's really up to you which you would want to run. The next sigil is Improved Dodge. Please just run Improved Dodge. The next is Guts. This lets you take a nasty hit and shrug it off. Because you wouldn't die if you're mid-combo, you can simply heal during your combo after taking that hit, and look super badass while doing it. Without it, your team might wonder why you're blatantly flying into bad stuff, then constantly reviving yourself. You don't really need Guts to be maxed at level 20, and it's too much of a downside to have it appear on a different sigil secondary when it could have easily been something else. So I suggest having just the one Guts sigil. The only exception may be seeing at least 5 levels of it on a right stone, but all it really does is reduce the cooldown before Guts is able to proc again by a minute. Which isn't bad, but I think you understand what I'm getting at. Just play better, so that Guts allows you the few oopsies that you might take. The next is Potion Hoarder. Right after I said just play better, you can rest assured that even I make super dumb mistakes and get tossed around like a ragdoll because I love testing Siegfried's limits. Having a third revive potion and plenty of heals is super helpful for this maniac playstyle. Our next would be Nimble Onslaught. I highly recommend this as it contributes so much and synergizes with the playstyle. Extending the invincibility means more attacks, less ouchies. Boosting the charge speed of your SBA is great since Siegfried and the other slower attacking characters generally struggle to build this up, so you get to pretty much keep up with the rest of your team. And it even shortens the cooldowns on your beloved skills. It's incredible and I think is super important to have. Next would be ideally what you should look for to get you to damage cap. I usually see how much I can get with just having critical damage since I'm pretty much always critting, and this sigil gives a lot for so little. I understand that it boosts the damage of attacks and not your actual attack power, but combined with stamina, I'm pretty much always at damage cap. I saved these for last since I'm sure you understand by now how rare these are, but definitely help immensely for when you get them, and I hardly feel any need to mention that you should add them to your build. But those would be War Elemental and supplementary damage. Only real advice I can give on these is how many supplementary damages you should add. Because Siegfried does attack fairly slower than the rest of the cast, it might be pretty helpful to get a decently high chance for supplementary to proc. But don't go overboard if it feels like it's going to get in the way of your other sigils. This last bit of advice is for anyone that isn't really getting every sigil they could have asked for. And that is to understand that most times, having a single sigil of something is oftentimes better than having it at max trait level. Things like Cascade aren't offering a lot to Siegfried, but having a bit of it still helps. The same could be said for quick cooldown. That's it, my friends. I super appreciate you watching the video. Please like the video as it does help me out immensely, And consider subscribing so you can keep up with any future videos I put out. I also stream on Twitch if you'd like to stop by and maybe see the action and theory crafting live. You can find that link down below in the description. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye bye.